and welcome to a live edition of Anthony's Rewind. Now, we're only on episode 2, and I'm very new at this, and I said, I tried doing the whole pre-recorded thing, and I felt like I just took it way too hard on myself. I ended up stopping and going so many times. I said, you know what? I'm going to throw myself into the pit of fire and just do this live. So we're doing it live, and we're here today to talk about the movie Pulp Fiction. Now, if you're new to Anthony's Rewind, it's a new concept to the channel, but here is the premise of what Anthony's Rewind is. Let's first kill the music, shall we? Boom. There we go. A couple of months ago, I was having a conversation with a buddy of mine, and he was talking about his favorite movie of all time. I was talking about my favorite movies of all time, and we started going down this rabbit hole of our movies we loved and why we loved them. And then the question started coming out like, well, when was the last time we actually watched those movies? Like, when did those movies actually make sense to us? Like, we all grow, we all change in our lives, and we have different opinions about things. We have kids, we have jobs, we do things, and then do those movies fit in our day-to-day life nowadays? Have things changed to make that movie maybe not so popular in our lives? And it was really easy for me to jump into this. Movies have been a big part of my life for a long time. I worked in movie theaters from basically all of my early childhood, right through high school, college, and hell, even in my adulthood, I did it just for fun. So movies have played a big role in my life, and I wanted to jump into a series of movies that I remember loving, that I've always been excited about, and that was Quentin Tarantino films. And I figured, there's 9 movies in his series, and I've seen all of them, and I've always said that they're some of my favorite movies of all time. So what I did was, previous to me doing this show, I actually ranked them from 1 through 9 of what I, at that time, thought my favorite movies were. So at this time, right before I did this show, I had Reservoir Dogs as 1, Kill Bill 1 and 2 as number 2, Death Proof as number 3, Inglorious Basterds as number 4, Pulp Fiction number 5, Jackie Brown number 6, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood number 7, to Django Unchained 8, and number 9 at the Hateful Eight, which is interesting because I will say this, none of these movies are bad movies, but it's just that is what I remember liking them as. Now, last week I did my rewind on Reservoir Dogs, and I found myself loving the movie, but not as much as I did when what I recall it. And I gave it an 8.2. This week takes us back to the second movie in Tarantino's films, and that is Pulp Fiction. And I will tell you this, I tried recalling when the last time I saw this movie was, and it had to been previous to me getting with my wife and previous to me dating her. So it must have been 18 years since I last saw this movie. And for some reason in my head, I had this movie not something that I was connecting with at that time, that I liked it, but it was still things that were just going over my head. I sit down last night completely uninterrupted. I put my phone away, laptop away, completely set myself into this movie. And man, when it's cool seeing something you hadn't seen in such a long time, because I was thoroughly taking for a ride that Tarantino set up, and I was shocked, thoroughly shocked, how much more I enjoyed this movie than I thought I was going to. It really just took me for a wild ride. And there was something about this movie that even Reservoir Dogs did that made me even think about future films. This movie truly, even though Uma Thurman is on, as you can see over here to my side, she is the prominent one on the poster. She's not really the main character, but she can be. There's so many different characters in this movie, and depending on how you look at this movie and how it comes to you, this movie really can take on the character portrayal as who the main character is, because there's so many different stories being told in this movie. But once again, you start at one point, you bounce around throughout the entire film, going through these different stories to kind of bring you right back to the first scene in the movie, but it's through another eyes. And what's really cool about this movie is you're starting to see Tarantino start filling into that role of director and giving the ability that he wanted, that you could start seeing in Reservoir Dogs, of how he was filming things, how the small details were, and how he was building out this universe of movies and characters. Really, I feel jumps really hard in Pulp Fiction. I mean, there's some great details of conversations and how the camera would tilt to the right or to the left to really join in those conversations and remove one character just enough to give enough focus on the character speaking. Or going back to like my favorite shot in Reservoir Dogs, where in a scene in the diner, like there's conversation between two characters, and the way that it would work is as one speaking, you would have the camera angle back on him, but then it would go back to the other person as the other character speaking, but the angles of the cameras weren't level to each other. It was on the eyes of the character speaking. The contrast in this film is something that, in my older ages, and I'm very heavily into audio video, I'm noticing it more and more, especially in these last two films, when there's scenes of gore and it needs to be gore. There is the contrast where he utilizes the blood and the gore to really stand out and be prominent. But there's times where there's things in this movie where, once again, it's implied, where they're not really showing you anything, but you know it's there. When, there's a scene where the two hitmen are going into the apartment and they're conversating and then they shoot a guy, but you never see blood. Like, there's nothing there. And I think that's what's cool about, Tarantino, and that's what I love about older movies. And I've said this in my last episode. It makes more sense to me to have implied features in a movie where it makes your mind kind of open things up than it does to just force feed you just over-the-top gore. It just does. Over-the-top gore just doesn't do it for me. So Pulp Fiction really hit it at the park with a lot of the way they were able to use implied, how they were able to still utilize even gore and do all these different things. It was fantastic in its own sense. And if you think about the cast that's here, you have John Travolta coming in for the first time for Tarantino. You had Uma Thurman, who really, at this time, this is when I fell in love with her as an actress. I remember that clearly. I mean, Uma Thurman is probably like one of my favorite female actresses of all time. Samuel L. Jackson, who I think really jumpstarted his career in the film industry, really does an excellent job in this movie. And it's great because when I watched this and I saw him as a character in this movie, I felt differently about his character now than I did previous to watching it. We'll talk about that shortly. You have Bruce Willis in this movie, does a great job with Butch. You have Tim Roth making a second appearance in a Tarantino film as the diner robber. And then you have the likes of Vin Rames as Marcellus Wallace is in this movie, who does a really cool part in that. And then, you had some other cool people pop up. Of course, Tarantino's in this film. And I also say with that, I think this is his best part so far. Like, he definitely does a better job acting in this than he did in Reservoir Dogs. But there was a lot of great stuff in this, and the actors. Steve Buscemi makes a guest appearance. Christopher Walken makes a guest appearance, and it just the list kind of goes on and on and on of all the different people. And I think the biggest surprise to me that I totally forgot was in this movie was Harvey Keitel. So another appearance. So the premise of this movie, really, it starts off in a diner, and you have Tim Roth's character with his girlfriend or wife, and they're sitting at a diner, and they're talking about, things going back and forth, and they go to rob the joint. And then you have a cut scene, and then that's when you finally get to meet the main characters or whoever it is, and that's going to be John Travolta's Vincent Vega and Samuel L. Jackson's Julius Winfield. Now, what's interesting about the universe that Quentin Tarantino is doing at this time is that there is this Vincent Vega, and you have the Vega from Reservoir Dogs, who are brothers, which ties these movies together, which then opens up this whole thing of how these movies work together. And I'll talk about that here shortly, but it's interesting that we're seeing this tie together of characters in this universe that's not been done before. And the style of film and the way that he's directing and the way he's shooting this, it's once again something that hasn't been done before. So you're getting this style of film, this connection between movies that have really no linking together. It's not like a part two or a prequel or a sequel. It's just they're linked together. It's something that was never done before. So you get this introduction of these two characters, and they're going to meet up to take care of an issue or something. And you find them going into this apartment, and there's three guys, or end up being four guys, and they're trying to locate a briefcase. And it's interesting to me, and I've remember this theory from back a long time ago, and dug a little bit deeper in it too during Reservoir Dogs, of how there's this theory that suitcase that the hitmen are collecting from this apartment is actually the diamonds from Reservoir Dogs. that Mr. Pink somehow survived, and Mr. Pink ends up like losing the suitcase or something happens, and that those guys get the suitcase. And then there's another theory that there's a part where you meet Marcellus Wallace, and there's a bandit in the back of his head, and supposedly like a part of his soul has been disappeared, and it was captured in this thing. I think that's a little far fetched. So I like the idea of this Reservoir Dogs Diamonds suitcase. It all makes sense. It links up the Vega brothers. It links up all these different things, and it's great because once you have these one-liners in this movie that really stand out, and it really goes to test to tell you that like Quentin Tarantino, he's known not just for his the ability to get these actors to portray these amazing characters, but the dialogue he gives it is so real. And you get that line in this scene where it really stands out about where Samuel L. Jackson, after Vincent gets the suitcase, they point a gun at the guy that was supposed to, I guess, deliver this suitcase and had and you get this line that, for me, the way it was portrayed in this movie and the way everything rolls out, it is probably one of the most dynamic, like, acting portrayals that Samuel L. Jackson ever does, because he's so believable. So we get this. If it will let me play it, hold on a second. So we get this line from Samuel L. Jackson's character, and
you read the Bible, Brett? Yes. Well, there's this passage I got memorized. Sort of fits this occasion. Ezekiel 25:17. The path of the righteous man is beset on all sides by the iniquities of the selfish and the tyranny of evil men. Blessed is he who in the name of charity and goodwill shepherds the weak through the valley of darkness, for he is truly his brother's keeper and the finder of lost children. And I will strike down upon thee with great vengeance and furious anger those who attempt to poison and destroy my brothers. And you will know my name is the Lord when I lay my vengeance upon thee.
That scene is so powerful, and it's great because this is when my opinion about who the main character of this movie was. And once again, you can go into this and really determine who you want it to be. But you see Samuel L. Jackson's character in the beginning of this movie really locked into being this hitman, and right up to this point, he's dug deep into it. He talks about Marcel Wallace killing somebody for giving his wife a foot rub, and you get this ability of like Samuel L. Jackson being very dedicated to his craft. And then at a point in the movie, you get right shortly after this, you get a gentleman that you didn't know was in the apartment comes out and shoots at both Samuel L. Jackson, John Travolta's characters, and they totally miss him. And I think what it says, like, you see the character changing directly for Samuel L. Jackson. You start seeing the ability of him wanting to change, and throughout the movie, you hear that he's retiring, he's giving things up. And you start seeing him progress differently as a character and how he's doing things. So for me, that was huge. And I think for me, like watching this, like it really did determine like he was a standout character for me. At one point in my life, I definitely thought Uma Thurman was the main character. And maybe that was just because I was thoroughly like head over heels for her. And then at one point, I kind of remember like thinking like when I was younger, like Bruce Willis was the main character, because you do get a couple different scenes with Bruce Willis's character. Now, when you dig deep into the whole cross-section of Pulp Fiction, Reservoir Dogs tying in together, I went down a rabbit hole today. And that's another reason why I kind of did this whole live thing, because I wanted to talk a little bit about this and just kind of have it go out. So there is these theories of how the Reservoir Dogs is like a tie-in to Pulp Fiction in many ways. One is the suitcase. So yeah, now the guy's got the suitcase. That's the diamonds from from the original movie. There's the other tie-in that I read today, which kind of blew my mind, is in the original Reservoir Dogs, when Mr. Pink, Steve Buscemi, gives his speech and talks about not tipping, and not tipping because he feels a certain way, you shouldn't give sympathy to servers and all that stuff. Well, in Pulp Fiction, when you have Uma Thurman and John Travolta sitting in the diner, who is their server? Well, it's Steve Buscemi. And how's he acting? Completely miserable. And one of the theories I read is that he did survive, and to get out of the public eye of things, he did something that no one else would expect him to do, and that was to be a server. So that was a pretty interesting thing. And then the other crazy coincidental thing that I read was that, and this is where you're starting to really dig deep. So in the Reservoir Dogs, Orange is the detective. That is Tim Roth's character is the detective in the movie. He's dying. He's shot. And at the end of the movie, it's implied that Harvey Keitel's character shoots and kills him. Okay. Well, we never see that. So the implication is that in this idea is that Tim Roth's character survives, and he's upset that the cops didn't come in sooner. He's upset about everything. And then that reason of him putting the wedding ring on during the scene of him leaving the apartment to go meet up with the robbers in the first movie was actually indication of him and Bunny from Pulp Fiction. So there's a whole rabbit hole of how these things tie together, and it's fantastic. And there's so many different ideas, but this one seems the most realistic. Now, I think one of the other clever characters in this movie is John Travolta. John Travolta plays this really interesting character, Vincent Vega, who is the brother of the Vega from Reservoir Dogs, but he's just back from Amsterdam. He's getting back into the game of things, which is interesting. And one of the other things I found down the rabbit hole was that he went to Amsterdam because he was a part of the Vega situation from Reservoir Dogs, and he was coming back once the coast was clear, and that's why he was in Amsterdam for so long. Once again, rabbit hole, go down it if you want. And what I liked about him is his innocence a little bit to things. Like, he was like, he didn't really, if you watch him, he's very uncomfortable, like shooting people. Like, he didn't want to be a part of that, like, especially in the apartment. He's definitely like an awkward person. Like, he's just trying to do things the best he can. When he goes out with Uma Thurman in the scene in the diner, which to me, like, I think that scene stands out the most to me as something beautifully shot. The way things are shot and angle-wise, the way that he uses bokeh, which is that depth of field, and like Uma Thurman drinking the shake, the small conversations about a $5 shake, and then John Travolta having to try it to make sure a $5 shake's worth it, and just the small details really is what make this 2-hour and 38-minute movie really like just fly by. And, as I'm jumping around this movie, like, there's so much more to it that really I'm going to forget to talk about. There's Christopher Walken's conversation about the watch being up, how important the watch is. And then you come to find out later down the road that ties in Bruce Willis and how important the watch is, and he needs to get it back. It's all these small details that really stand out. And it really shows you that with the budget he was getting, which was drastically much more than Reservoir Dogs, what he was able to accomplish. So I watched a movie, and one other thing too I didn't even jump on, I really want to get on this a little bit, is the soundtrack. Once again, Quentin Tarantino does an excellent job of utilizing music around characters in the movie to really make them like badasses. Like he used such great music. Like, damn, that's the opening song in Pulp Fiction. That I mean, that is just so like, it's such a badass song, but everything about it, the when John Travolta, Uma Thurman are dancing on the floor, I mean, that was such a powerful, powerful, like just how it's done. And it's so simple, like just simple, like, oh, I forgot what they call it, like a rock and roll, like, I don't know, hip dance, whatever you want to call it. It was just done in a way that, like, it's just memorable. Because if I will say this, if you try to do this story with another director, I just don't think it works. The way that Tarantino is able to pull shit out of his head and utilize it on camera and utilize it with music and lighting and dialogue, it's just out of this world. And I will say this, at the end of this movie, when you see, everything wrap up, you're full circle, everything happened, you're back to where it all begins. And dude, at 2.5 hours flew by. There is one more scene I want to talk about, because I do think that this one had me laughing, and that is the scene where Uma Thurman overdoses on John Travolta's heroin as she snorts an immense amount of heroin up her nose, and you get this dialogue between the drug dealer and John Travolta, which really stood out to me, and this is a great one.
All right, quick, hurry up, man.
Okay,
hurry up.
Here, I'll tell you what to do. No, man. I ain't give you're gonna give it a shot.
No, you're gonna give it a shot.
I ain't giving her the shot.
I never done this
Yeah,
before.
I ain't never done it before either, all right? I ain't starting now. Look, you brought her here, and that means that you're gonna give her the shot. The day that I bring an OD and bitch to your house, then I give her the shot. Give her the shot.
Give it to me.
Here, give me that. All right, tell me what to do.
And it's crazy because they say you have to count down. They put a mark on Uma Thurman's chest and they hit her with it. And that to me, holy moly, that was like crazy, absolutely insane, like crazy scene. Because Uma Thurman pops up after they give her the adrenaline, and she is just a big needle at the second of her chest, which was like, give me EBGBs a little bit. But such a great scene. And there were so many great scenes in this movie, and it's a great rewatch. Once again, this movie does have, I mean, I don't know what it was with Quentin Tarantino in the early 90s. I know times are different, but man, he was very comfortable utilizing the N-word, especially around Samuel L. Jackson in his scene when he's, they're having to clean up the car and Harvey Keitel comes in. But the scene was that was the only scene I was like, man, this is kind of uncomfortable. Some of the other things that, like, it just didn't do it for me was, I understand there is I understand the idea of the watch and stuff of that, but I already knew it. And I think Christopher Walken's scene, while it is a very memorable one, I could have done without it after watching it a second and third, fourth time. There is a little bit to it it does show its date a little bit. Just the use of some techniques in film and some things how it's done it. I mean, the movie did come out in 94, I believe it was. So you're talking about a movie that is knocking on the door of 30 years. So did it hold up for 30 years? Yeah, I think so. Is it the greatest movie I've ever seen in my whole life? No, not by any means. Is it better than I thought it was? So this is where things got interesting for me. Like, I had this originally ranked on my list as number 5 in the Tarantino series, which was lower than Reservoir Dogs. And when I sat down to think about how I was going to rank this, I said, was it better than Reservoir Dogs? And then when I thought about it, I was like, yeah. Is the character development better than Reservoir Dogs? Yeah, I think so. Was it shot in a way that is better than Reservoir Dogs? Yes, but you talk about two different budgets. You talk about two different kind of films. It's different in that sense. Was the music utilization better? That's tough. I think that they are equal in that sense. Last week I gave Reservoir Dogs an 8.2. This week I am giving Pulp Fiction. I truly believe this is an 8.7 film. I think it's a fantastic film. I emailed a couple friends this morning after watching it, and I said, this is something you definitely have to rewatch. I think that this really is the jumpstart to, like, the faith building into the difference that Reservoir Dogs was, what he was able to do with that budget and those actors, going into Pulp Fiction and being able to have a budget that was drastically different than Reservoir Dogs, having a cast that was drastically different in many ways than Reservoir Dogs, and being able to knock it out of the park. And I think that's where, Tarantino succeeded. A lot of people could have fell on their face, and who knows if we would have continued down the pathway. Would we have had Jackie Brown? Would we have had Kill Bills? Would we have had Death Proof? Would we have had these other movies? It's up for interpretation. So we're looking, which is crazy to me, but Pulp Fiction right now on the new list is ahead of Reservoir Dogs at 8.7, Reservoir Dogs 8.2. Still two fantastic films. And next up on the list of movies to watch is Jackie Brown. So I will be heading to watch that movie next Saturday. We'll be doing I guess we're gonna do a live review of that one too. I kind of dig the live review a little bit. I think. I don't know. Hit the music. I don't know. Yeah, live review. We'll do it again. So until next time, my name is Anthony, and this is Anthony's Rewind. So tell me what you think. Pulp Fiction, Reservoir Dogs. How do you rank them? Do you like them? Do you not like them? All right. Well, let's restart that damn song, shall we?